My name is Tim Leandro, and I was the director on the two episodes that you want to talk about. Did I get involved in London's burning? I think it was just a matter of my agent at the time arranged it, and I went along and shot it. It was as simple as that. It was, yeah, it was quite simple from my end. I mean, the main thing I remember about the two episodes was the the shout, the action sequence. I haven't seen it for years, but I mean, it was big. It was one of the biggest sort of action sequences I'd shot at the time. I've shot a lot more subsequently, but it's still a big sequence. It's big by pretty much any standards. We we built a 50-meter long S-shaped dual carriageway in a tunnel on a fire stage, filled it with vehicles and sort of set fire to them all and blew them all up. And you know, that was quite a thing. And then we built the exterior of the tunnel on the old Woolwich Arsenal site, and blew that up as well. So, you know, that was a lot of fun, I have to say, doing those things. It was boys and their toys and all of that. That said, Heather Pierce, you know, did her bit, and then later on, she went on to. I worked with her again on Ultimate Force, so she was very much an action woman, and she could hold her own with the guys, you know, very effectively. It was a two-parter, so it was basically one story. So, I mean, the thing that I most vividly remember is the shout. There were other bits and pieces in it. There was a funny sequence with when they turned up and found what was supposed to be some kind of emergency, and it was a toy boat in a lake. I mean, it's fun, you know, kind of traveling around in fire engines, and you know, it was just lots of fun to do the show. That was the main thing I remember. Actually, it was an enjoyable experience. The stories, the individual storylines, kind of disappear into the mists of history. I think Sally, Heather Pierce's character, had a nasty stalker or rapist who she was having to fight off. But that was sort of the B story in that episode. The main story was this big shout that had a milk tanker that was actually full of petrol, and you know, that had to be put out, and yeah, lots of interesting things in the show, I have to say. When it came to the script, my main interactions were with Emma Kingsman Lloyd, who was the script editor on the show. She's now a producer, and the producer of the show was Angus Towler. Of course, lovely Angus was the producer, who was also very involved in scripting. So when it came to the scripts, they were really the people that I was engaging with rather than directly engaging with the writers. There was a company that supplied all the fire kit, and you know, the fire appliances and all the rest of it, and the technical advice, and they were excellent, and they were all, you know, real fire officers. The main guy was Roger Kendall. You might have heard of. I don't know if you yeah. So I mean, he's fabulous, and there's nothing that he doesn't know about the world of the fire service. And so yeah, I mean, they were magnificent people and a joy to work with, frankly. I remember that. And I subsequently worked with Roger on other productions. As I recall, he was on The Golden Hour, which I also did for ITV. Well, it was a combination of both. The interior of the station, well, that was an existing station that we'd shot on, and there was an arrangement of the fire brigade there in Leighton, and so that's real. Some of the interiors of the characters were built at 3 Mill Studios. The exterior of the pub was a real place. So the Oliver Twist, I think it was called, the exterior geography between the Oliver Twist and the fire station was actually real. So it was literally across the road from the fire station. But when you went inside the Oliver Twist, you then went onto a set that was also shot, I believe, at 3 Mills. So we used some interior sets at 3 Mills. We used some real locations, and then all the episode locations, as it were, the special locations were on location, but sometimes they were built. Like as I was describing, the entire tunnel for the shout was constructed at 2 different places. So the interior and the exterior were at different places. It was a pretty standard shooting block, as I recall. So it would have been an ITV hour per episode. So they'd have given us a couple of weeks per episode, a 4-week shooting block. It would have been for the 2 episodes. I can't remember specifically. There may have been some, movement on that, but it would have been around that 10 days per episode, I think, or it may have been 11-day fortnights, which would have given us 12 days for the episodes. I mean, it was a complex production number. I remember that. So it was, it was pretty pressured. And I recall there was a day actually inside the Oliver Twist where they had their kind of warm down after the shout. And it was a long scene. It was 7 pages to shoot, and I'd run out of time effectively. And I shot the 7 pages with essentially 2 developing shots on Steadicam, and with a few cutaways to knit it together. And that was how I kind of hoovered it up very quickly, which is quite an unconventional way to do that sort of thing. But it was either that or not get it. And actually, the result was pretty effective. It had a nice dynamic to it because of these lovely moving shots. So yeah, that was it. I mean, it was probably by today's standards relatively comfortable in terms of shooting time, but it was still tight. The shout was, as I say, very ambitious and highly technical. I never met them, so I have no personal stories to tell you. I mean, they're legends in the industry. And I have huge respect for what they've done. And London's Burning is a landmark show, and it was a privilege to work on it. But other than that, I really can't tell you anything about them personally as individuals, or I'm afraid. I don't know, to be honest. I mean, it gets a bit technical, but I mean, the television drama landscape has changed radically um, since those days. And broadly speaking, there aren't as many what you might call uniform shows on TV today as there used to be. The medical dramas, the police dramas, the fire dramas, and so on. Occasionally they do come up, but things have moved on a lot, and the way people watch TV is different with all the streamers, and the audiences are different. So it's difficult to see in the present landscape a production like London's Burning emerging, in the foreseeable future. But things change quite quickly, and you never know where we'll be in a few years' time. Things could change again. So I know that. I mean, there are people who really love these shows. I mean, it's not just London's Burning. I also worked on The Bill, and I know that there's a lot of people who really want to see The Bill come back, and there's even talk of that happening. How serious that is, it's very difficult to know. So it's a tricky one, and it's finding an angle that would work in the modern world. And so, the police drama of the moment that people think about is Line of Duty, which is quite different in tone to The Bill or Z Cars or Holby Blue, or these sorts of shows, City Central. It's much more, for want of a word, subversive, I suppose. It's sort of left field, and it's dealing with very dark issues. And a lot of these shows were quite determinedly aimed at what was called the family audience. Well, that's kind of been splintered by the streamers and the fact that everybody watches TV in their own rooms rather than sits down as a family and watches television. And that really changes the way that commissioners look at their audience and conceive product. The idea of making a show that an entire family will sit down and watch together is, it's less of a thing. And that was the audience really that London's Burning was made for. Today the teenagers will watch something, their thing in their own room, and the parents won't know what they're watching. And similarly, the parents might be watching who knows what, Midsummer Murders, which is fine, but the kids don't want to watch that, and so on. So I think a return of London's Burning might be, it would be a surprise, I think, in the present situation, but who knows? It's the only time I worked with him. And my recollection is that he was a thoroughly nice guy, very professional, and utterly dependable. That's my main recollection of him. Funny thing about uniform shows, often when actors put on the uniform, it kind of informs their personality. It's not just the character they're playing. And if you're playing an authority figure in a uniform, that kind of becomes who you are in the workplace. And I think that was, quite true of Edward. But very good, very professional, solid guy. I mean, they were all lovely. I have to say, I certainly don't have anything bad to say about any of them. They were professional, hardworking. They enjoyed themselves. We had that kind of vibe on the set where it was fun, but it was serious fun. And when people had to focus, they had to focus. And they were all, there was there were none of the cast really who I wouldn't be happy to work with again. In fact, several of them I have worked with again, and so well, at least one of them is still a friend of mine, Sam Callis. We're mates. And I've worked with Sam a few times, and I've worked with Heather Peace a few times. There were a few of them who were, good people who you see kind of, they come around, they cycle around, and you see them in casting sessions, and occasionally get the opportunity to work with them again, which is nice. In fact, I recently worked with Ross Boatman, who I didn't work with in this episode, in these episodes, but he's now in EastEnders, and I shot EastEnders last year, and he was in my episode, so that was nice. One thing about the casting, since we're talking about casting, one piece of casting that I'm very proud of for this episode, because it was a piece of casting that I did, as opposed to the regular cast. I cast Idris Elba in this episode, and that was before he did The Wire. And he turned up, and he was just sensational. It was obvious to me in the casting session that he was brilliant. And it became evident to the principal cast who had to work with him that he was brilliant. So even then, before The Wire, we sort of knew that this guy had something that, and it totally didn't surprise me in the slightest when he became a star, because he was the finished article then. He was, pretty impressive to work with. So that was a privilege that I still remember. The main thing I remember were the technicalities. It's a highly technical thing to shoot. The great thing about these days, if you were going to do such a thing, there would be VFX all over it. It would all be done in post-production. In those days, what you see in the show is what you get. We did all that. It's not been done afterwards. It's been filmed on location in the camera. There's little or no post-production work on that. I think Nigel Cattle, the brilliant editor who worked on it, who I ended up also, it was the first time I worked with him, and we ended up doing lots of things together because he's fantastic. I think he painted in a couple of headlamps on cars in the tunnel. That was the totality of the CGI work that was done on that. So, when you see explosions and vans falling over, for instance, that was done for real. We had a hydraulic ram in the van, and it was fired on cue, and the van falls over, and so on. So I think there was one matte shot when there's an explosion and the team sort of fly towards the camera. I think I shot that against a green screen. That is a composite shot, but literally the rest of it was done for real, which again is great, because I think you wouldn't have the opportunity to do that today. It would all be green screen and done in post, and where's the fun in that? Is my view. It's much better to do it for real. And frankly, it looks better on camera. I agree with Tom Cruise in that respect. Stunts are done in the camera are always better than mocked up in post, because you don't really fool anybody. People just look at it and go, it's special effects. And it kind of takes you out of the story. But if you actually do it in front of the camera, that's much more engaging and involving for the audience, in my opinion. Any other memories? I mean, there's lots, but I mean, a lot of it is to do with behind the scenes stuff and the technicalities and how we worked out what we were going to do in the tunnel. You know, I remember I think it was the third AD or was it the second, was sent out to buy toy cars, and I drew out the S-shaped dual carriageway on a big sheet of paper, and we put the toy vehicles in there so that everybody could see. And I remember sitting around the table with the first AD and the cinematographer deciding on the setups. I remember things like putting cameras, shooting on film, of course, and that's lovely. I mean, you're putting cameras into safe boxes so that they could be placed close to explosions, so that when things blew up and things started flying around, that the camera would be protected. I mean, little things like that just stick in the mind. And the other thing that is important about that show is, in fact, that it was shot on film. The next series was the final series, which I didn't work on, when I believe they went to tape, digibeta. And the problem with tape, of course, it's not as bad now with digital media, which can do lots of things. But in those days, tape couldn't handle the exposure difference of flame, and basically flames became white on tape, which you don't want. So since we had all this flame and all the rest of it, it was vital that we shot on film in order to get the full range of exposure, in order to be able to see the colors of the flames, plus the actors in the same shot and everything being exposed correctly. Things like that. Matters like this don't matter to the audience in the slightest, but to filmmakers, they matter greatly. It matters to us that you have images that tell the story in the way you want them to be told. And certainly capturing flame was a huge issue for that show. So yeah, those are the sorts of things that I remember. I'm not sure if that interests anybody other than me, but yeah, it's that kind of thing. I teach now. I teach at York University, where I'm a senior lecturer in directing for film and television. I still occasionally direct when the opportunity arises, usually in a summer holiday. So last year I did EastEnders, as I mentioned to you, and I've just worked on produced a short film called Tomorrow, which is directed by Georgie Bisley, and it was it stars Tyler Cunningham and Chan Woo Lim, who people might know from Holby, and so that was shot just a couple of weeks ago, actually, and so it's presently in the edit. So I keep my hand in when I can. I'm not sure I'm going to be shooting anything for television this summer, but you never know. But generally, I'm sort of more of an academic these days than active career filmmaker or television director. You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.